United Airlines 737, and many aviation experts who've screened that tape where you actually see the aircraft going into the World Trade Tower, the second aircraft, have identified it as a 737, so there seems to be some conjunction with that. Let me just give you a couple of details about the World Trade Center, because you heard us talking with Canadian Craig Wilson, who's in New York, and he was trying to give us a sense of just how many people are in that building on a normal day. 50,000 people work in those twin towers. It's unclear how many got out before these events happened. 50,000 people work on a normal day in the World Trade Center. These pictures of the towers dropping about an hour and a half to 2 hours after the aircraft hit. The structural damage would have been enormous, and this was the result shortly after the aircraft hit. John Thompson is an expert on terrorist activities. He oversees and watches the terrorism story from his post at the Mackenzie Institute. He joins us here in Toronto. John, every minute here is a new detail on this incredible story. What is your sense of what we're witnessing here? What are you thinking?
This is not terrorism anymore, it's war. It's gone far beyond the limits of any normal terrorist attack. You know, in 1941, 3,500 American citizens were killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the damage in terms of destruction of buildings and ships was in the tens of millions, and this has probably been exceeded. Maybe 35,000 deaths this morning so far. Tens of billions of dollars worth of destruction, as if that counts against this much of a loss of life. And I think we knew that someday there'd be weapons of mass destruction used in terrorism, but there was always thought there'd be more time to discuss what likely or appropriate responses would be to something like this. But this is an attack that is on the same scale as using a tactical nuclear weapon or nerve gas on a city. And it's done even more harm than these weapons might have been able to do. And the perpetrators behind this have gone way beyond the reasonable bounds of terrorism. This is not a political act for the purposes of communication that kills 1 or 2 or even a couple of hundred people. This is much worse.
I should point out, I know you used that figure 35,000 based on what could have happened here today.
I think we'll be very lucky if that many people did not die. And God knows, hundreds of Canadians work in the World Trade Center.
Well, let's just underline at this time that we don't know.
Yeah, not yet.
We don't know, but we do know that 50,000 people work there on a normal day. The first incident here happened shortly before 9 o'clock, the second after 9 o'clock, and the buildings were down by 10:30. And well, we can only hope and pray that the numbers, as awful as they are going to be, are not as awful as that. Who's capable of something like this?
This is the frightening thing. We knew that in terrorism, as sort of techniques and methodologies improve, that you know, again, when weapons of mass destruction became available, that you would have results like this. But this sort of coordination with 4 or 5 aircraft hijackings and this level of planning is very, very sophisticated. And it's too soon to point the finger, and there'll be a lot of idiots lining up to claim credit for this action, but I think you might follow the strings all the way to Afghanistan.
Can you give us a sense of what must be going on in the command and control structure of the United States Defense Department, intelligence departments, the White House right now? We know all aircraft in North America have been grounded. One assumes this is an obvious precaution to try and get down what they can control down, and you know, determine what's left after that. But what do they do? What do they do at a time like this?
Well, you're looking at professionals for the most part who will put their emotion and their rage very quietly to one side and concentrate. as hard as they can to limit further destruction and to understand what happened. And then to probably dust off plans that they never hope to dust off about what they do as a result of this.
Let me stop you just for a minute. We're just getting a new piece of information that's coming in from two different news organizations. So we'll repeat this. The Pentagon says a hijacked plane headed toward Washington is no longer a threat. This would have been a third one. There are reports that a United Airlines plane has gone down at or in the vicinity of Camp David. That is the presidential retreat. Sources suspected the jet was en route to the Pentagon and fighter jets had been scrambled. The west wing of the Pentagon collapsed this morning after a small plane slammed into that building. There has been suspicion for the last hour or two that if they were aware of another aircraft that had been hijacked, and if they could find it, they would have to make the difficult decision of dealing with it no matter who or how many people were on board. And that may have been what happened here. We're also not aware of any more details yet on that situation in Pennsylvania, where a large aircraft believed to be a 767 has gone down within 100 miles of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What happened there, we are not aware of. John, any other thoughts you have right now as we look at these pictures?
I'm just horrified.
Yeah, I think you've captured the word that most people have been by what they have seen today, what they have witnessed, and what they are just imagining. It is just too hard to imagine what has happened here and what may still be happening as all actions are being taken now by governments around the world, certainly here in North America, to prevent any air traffic, to ground all aircraft. That is unheard of in the history of our nations. No aircraft flying anywhere authorized to fly, and aircraft that are still in the air, one assumes, are heading to their nearest airports where they can land. The major Canadian airport, Pearson International, here in Toronto, has been used by a number of overseas flights that had been originally heading towards New York, where these pictures show you what happened a little over an hour ago as the towers of the World Trade Center dropped to the ground. Once again, let me underline, 50,000 people work in those towers in a normal day. As John Thompson mentioned, many Canadians from various Canadian financial services and other offices that have space in those towers. How many were in there? How many got out? We do not know, but we can obviously only assume that there have been many, many, many deaths and casualties as a result of this. This is the skyscape of New York City this morning. Just unbelievable. At first, when the first aircraft went into the World Trade Tower, there were some suspicions that it was an accident, that an aircraft had been in distress and in trying to land had hit one of the towers. Hard to imagine on a perfectly clear day like this, but that was one of the early suspicions, I guess, perhaps hopes. But within a quarter of an hour, a second aircraft came in and slammed into the other tower. Now both towers are down, as we see. Can we go back to Washington to hook up with, first of all, Dave? Okay, David Halton is just going to be joining us in a moment or two. This is, as we mentioned, the video of the second aircraft hitting the second tower at the World Trade Center. And I know some of you may be wondering why we keep repeating this video. Many people in different parts of the country are still joining us. After all, it is just after 8 o'clock on the west coast of this nation, where people are waking up to the horrific news of this terrible act. An apparent terrorist act, as President George W. Bush has called it in the United States. As John Thompson said, this isn't terrorism, this is war. We are looking at a horrific scene on scales that we just could not imagine just 2 hours ago. From pictures in New York, we go to Washington, where the CBC's David Halton joins us now from our bureau there. David, what can you tell us?
Well, Peter, I just got back from the Pentagon. I was actually earlier this morning trying to catch a plane from National Airport to New York, not knowing at that point that all the airports had been closed. As we were just moving up to National Airport in a taxi, we heard this huge muffled roar, got out of the cab and looked behind us, and there was this black, huge mushroom cloud over the Pentagon. We drove back towards the Pentagon, and the whole western side of the building had collapsed. As you know, it's a huge, huge building, and at that point, the western side of the Pentagon had collapsed. We talked to one apparent eyewitness who said that a small plane, he thought a small plane had arrived and dive bombed the Pentagon from the western side. Sense of panic all around the area, the police closing off streets. A sense of disbelief among people I talked to out there. How could this happen to the symbols of power, one person asked in Washington. Just amazing. Others asking, well, how could this be so well organized? How could these people have got through airports to have hijacked these planes? A sense of disbelief, not really panic, but certainly fear, a real palpable sense of fear, Peter.
David, let's run down exactly what the state of play is with the administration right now in trying to deal with this. The President of the United States, George W. Bush, was in Florida today for one of his major education announcements. He has left Florida and is heading back to Washington now. One assumes that in Washington, while obviously the President is in control from the airborne White House, perhaps one of the only aircraft to be flying in the United States right now. The Vice President, Dick Cheney, one assumes is in control at the White House or somewhere near the White House, because I believe it's been evacuated. What can you tell us on that front?
Well, certainly the Secret Service has ordered the large part of the White House evacuated. They're reporting that there was indeed a credible threat to the White House at one point. All the West Wing's been evacuated. So presumably Vice President Cheney is working from either his private residence or another office in Washington. The whole area around the White House has been cordoned off. All federal buildings here are being evacuated. We've seen a sense, not, as I say, not of panic, but of fear, especially touched off by the fact there were those additional bombings, a car bombing outside the State Department, and at one point rumors of a bomb at the Capitol building. But so far, thankfully, those rumors haven't been borne out.
All right, stand by for a minute, David. We've been hearing reaction from different world leaders. We know the Russians have put their air defenses on alert. We've heard that Israel has evacuated all its embassies all around the world. Canada deploring the actions, opening its airports to, especially to transatlantic flights that were destined for the United States that have to land somewhere, and they are coming into various Canadian airports, the main one being Pearson Airport in Toronto. We can tell you that the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, has just said in an interview that he fears a tremendous number of lives have been lost. Keep in mind, 50,000 people on a normal day work in that area of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. The latest on the story from Pittsburgh. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the Somerset County Airport. That's about 80 miles from Pittsburgh. It's believed to be, and I was afraid we were going to hear this, a 747 jumbo jet, which is the largest passenger aircraft. Crashed about 10 o'clock. It's believed the plane originated in either Cleveland or New York and was bound for Chicago. We don't know what happened to that aircraft and whether it's related to this story, but it's one assumes that it may well have been. 747s don't just drop out of the sky. As David reported, the Pentagon says a hijacked plane headed toward Washington is no longer a threat. It appears to have gone down in the vicinity of Camp David. More on what Rudy Giuliani had to say. This is the scenes from Washington. This is the Pentagon, which is in flames from that incident on the other side. It's believed that the damage there is minor in spite of the major degree of smoke that you're seeing. As we look back in New York in a moment here, a little more on what Rudy Giuliani has to say. He says a tremendous number of lives have been lost. He says every available search and rescue worker has been called out after the World Trade Center was targeted by terrorists. Planes smashed into the Twin Towers. Just reading raw from the wire copy here. Giuliani says he personally saw people leaping from the windows in a desperate bid to escape. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, the agency that monitors all aircraft movements in the United States, is saying at this hour that it has lost track of a number of aircraft. We're not sure how to take that and what that may mean. But it's clear that this situation is still ongoing, that in a process to try and get a grip on which planes are going where and which ones may be a potential threat, all aircraft have been told to get on the ground. No takeoffs, are being allowed anywhere in North America, and the only landings that are taking place are those aircraft that have to get down, many of them coming in off transatlantic flights. As we continue to monitor this scene in New York, which obviously we're going to be doing for quite some time to come today, as I'd mentioned, we've been hearing reaction from a number of parts of the world, actions taken by governments and comments made by leaders. The latest leader to comment on what we've witnessed today is the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Here is what he said just a short time ago.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
سيادة الرئيس، ما هو موقفكم من الانفجارات التي وقعت اليوم في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية؟
We are shocked. We were together with the president. We cannot believe what we were watching, and we condemn strongly, not more than strongly. I mean, it's outrageous. It's something unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
That is what terror have to be stopped. Any place, anywhere. And I think that we are trying to do, the Palestinian leadership, European Union, to stop this. And then really we were very, very shocked, and we conveyed to the American administration our not only sympathy, our full support to fight and to really get out of this incredible act.
Senator Reis, are you planning to call the U.S. President to convey the personal condolences?
I will send him directly a quick telegram.
So thank you. Bye.
The comments of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, using a word that is being used around the world by leaders and just ordinary people who have witnessed the horror of what's taken place in New York and continues to take place, using the word unbelievable. Two aircraft slamming into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Both towers, as we're looking at tape here now, collapsed within 90 minutes. 50,000 people work in those towers on a normal day. It is not known how many were trapped inside when all this took place, but the expectation is that the toll in terms of casualties, both dead and injured, is going to be enormous, well into the thousands. Quickly going through the latest updates on this story, as there are things happening around the world and certainly across North America as it relates to this. Key ministers of the Crown in Canada, Canadian cabinet ministers, are holding an emergency meeting. They will make an announcement later. One assumes that is in Ottawa. There is a report that the CIA building in Langley, just outside of Washington, has been evacuated, and the key members of the CIA who would be monitoring things like this have moved to a new location, and obviously no one is saying just where that is. More on the Pittsburgh situation. We have told you as we monitor this tape, and it It gets almost too hard to watch this over and over and over again. But this is the second aircraft hitting the second tower in New York City. Both towers now are down. The latest situation from Pennsylvania. Here's the latest Associated Press story. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the major airport, Somerset County Airport. It's believed to be a 747, crashed about 10 a.m. They're not saying which airline was involved, and it's unclear if the crash was related to the attacks in New York City and Washington. It's awfully hard to imagine that it is not in some manner related. A number of accidents and incidents taking place in different parts of the United States as we continue to monitor this situation and replay a tape of people trying to get away from the World Trade Center area in Washington. The whole south end of Manhattan, we're now told, has been ordered to be evacuated. Obviously, it's unclear just how many explosions that would follow something like this could still take place, and concern about the safety of those who have survived the first couple of waves of all this is still very much evident. American Airlines has now announced that it is confirming the loss of 2 flights. One of those from Boston to L.A., which hit the Trade Center. They're not saying what happened in terms of their second flight that they are confirming the loss of. But American Airlines confirming the loss of 2 flights. The more you read of this, the more you see of this, the more unbelievable and incredible this story is. The United States in a virtual state of siege today. All aircraft grounded, also here in the United States. Okay, I'm just given information that the American Airlines now saying the second flight was a flight that had taken off from Washington's Dulles Airport heading to Los Angeles. So both flights for American Airlines were LA bound. Both aircraft have been lost to American Airlines. One is one of the aircraft involved in the World Trade Center. We're unclear of what the where the second one hit, but we know there are aircraft down in Pennsylvania. One near the Pentagon, a small aircraft near the Pentagon, and there are reports of another aircraft down near Camp David. Look at that picture. It well, you don't need to have any more descriptions from me of what we're witnessing there. David Holton joins us again from Washington. David, anything you can update us on here?
Just 1,000 questions, Peter, and no answers at this point. When I was out at the Pentagon earlier today, a couple of the bystanders there, very, very fearful, said, how could this have happened? And their first question was, how did those people get through the airport security to hijack those aircraft? How was this so well organized? One of them said, I can understand if there was 1 or even 2 isolated terrorist attacks, but this wave of bombings today, this wave of terrorist acts suggests, an extraordinarily well organized, well coordinated attack.
David, we're joined, thanks David, get back to you in a moment. We're joined on the phone now from New York City by a Canadian who is witnessing the horror on the streets of that American city right now. His name's Andrew Bast. Andrew, can you start off by telling us just where you are?
I'm in my office. It's about 20-25 blocks north of the World Trade, just on the border between Soho and Greenwich Village.
All right. Take us through what you saw, what you heard today.
It's just shocking. As I was coming into the office this morning, the subways were all closed because I had just left my apartment just when the first attack started. And as soon as it happened, the city just erupted in sirens. I mean, New York is not a quiet city to begin with. But when the first attack happened, that's when everything just lit up, and there were ambulances and fire trucks and everything racing by. I live straight up the street on 7th Avenue, so as I was walking down to the office, which is about halfway between my place and the World Trade, the sidewalks were just teeming with people looking at the 2 buildings up in flames. Just shocking, absolutely shocking. Nobody expected to see something like this.
Has there been any move towards having you leave your building or to have your building evacuated?
Yes, I just heard over the intercom that our building has been asked to leave, and my company itself, which occupies a couple of the floors here in this building, We've been told here that we're going to close for a few days now, and that everybody's to go home and not report to work for a couple of days, but to get out there, donate blood, and to volunteer, things like that.
Well, we're not going to keep you from either of those assignments, evacuation or helping those who are obviously going to need help. Andrew, we appreciate you giving us a call and talking to us. Thank you. Andrew Bast, a Canadian in New York City who is caught up in the horror of this day there. Continuing to update the worldwide effects of this, NATO headquarters has evacuated all non-essential people. That headquarters is in Brussels. It's in Belgium. So concern obviously on both sides of the Atlantic. Just to confirm once again, American Airlines announcing out of its major headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, that it has lost, that's the word it's using, lost 2 of its aircraft, carrying a total of 156 people. One of those was one of the aircraft to hit the World Trade Center. It's unclear what the second aircraft involvement in this story is, but American Airlines confirming that they've lost, that's their word, 2 aircraft today. Further details, just quickly going through the latest information that's given to me. I think we're up to date on that front. Okay, we heard from David. Somebody just let me know. Right. Okay. I'm not sure where you are watching our program from, anywhere in the country, but the odds are that if you look out your windows right now, you're seeing a stalled traffic, because it seems to be happening everywhere. People fixated on the information that's coming from New York and Washington and the after effects that are happening in different parts of the country. Here in Toronto, traffic has come to a gridlock as well in the biggest city in this country. Norman Hermont is down there in the traffic. Norman, what can you tell us?
Well, Peter, what's happening here on Bay Street is a lot of these financial office towers here are slowly emptying out for the day. People are just being told to go home. There are no real building evacuations. This seems to be something that's happening on a company-by-company basis. Of course, a lot of the people here would have either colleagues working New York, branch offices in New York in the area that was hit today. A lot of them say part of this is a safety reason, part of it is just a recognition that there's not going to be a lot of work done later on today.
All right, Norman Hermont joining us from the streets of Toronto, and he'll also be checking out the situation at Pearson International Airport here in Toronto when he gets there, in terms of the different aircraft that have been coming in there, diverted to Canada as a result of what's happened in the United States. We should let you know, when the first attack on the first tower in New York City happened, it was almost 3 hours ago now, at 8:45 Eastern Time. Since then, there has been only one official comment from an American government official, and that was the President of the United States, who has called this an apparent terrorist action. He called on Americans and those around the world to pray for the victims and to pray for the United States as it faces this dilemma. Since then, there has been no official reaction. In other words, we haven't seen somebody of the American government, an official, in front of a camera or a microphone, which gives you some indication that they are still trying to deal with this situation at this hour, that until they fully comprehend what has been going on and what actions are being taken to try and prevent any further loss of life or further actions, they haven't headed out towards the cameras. David Halton is monitoring the situation in Washington. David, we haven't heard anything to change that in the last few minutes, have we? We haven't heard of anybody coming before the cameras yet?
We haven't, Peter, and I guess what a lot of people are waiting for now is whether President Bush, flying back from Florida, does land at Andrews Air Force Base, which had been his original landing spot, or whether he goes to another destination or stays airborne for a couple more hours. We don't have the answers to that at this stage, but you're right, no official comment apart from those earlier words from President Bush this morning. And
one assumes that's got to mean they still, at this time, they just don't know what they're dealing with, where this attack's coming from, at what stage it's in, and just how exactly they're trying to deal with it. Because, I mean, aircraft, dropping out of the sky, like a 747 crashing in Pennsylvania, another one near Camp David. Obviously, we don't have all the details on this yet. We don't know why they ended up crashing, or quite possibly whether they were perhaps shot down. But until we actually hear from somebody in the U.S. government, one has to assume that they are still very much in the stages of this where they're not really sure what they're dealing with.
I think they're completely confounded by what's going on, Peter. No idea, no expectation of this. The only word that there have been some tip-offs was the Secret Service reporting earlier this morning that there had been a report that there might be an attack on the White House itself. That was what precipitated the evacuation of the West Wing of the White House. But I think when you're dealing with this kind of coordinated terrorist attack, it's extremely difficult to pinpoint where the attack originated at this stage and who was involved.
All right, David, we'll be back to you in a moment. Just very briefly from New York City, more comments from Rudolph Giuliani, the mayor of New York. He's ordered an evacuation of the lower part of Manhattan, that's the south end. And here's his quote: "I would like to take this opportunity to tell everyone to remain calm and, to the extent that they can, evacuate lower Manhattan." He also said there has been an enormous loss of life, and added that there was no threat or warning of the attack received by his office, or that he's aware received by anyone else. Again, as we look at the skyline of New York City, minus the two towers of the World Trade Center now, both fallen to the ground after they were hit by aircraft. A reminder, 50,000 people work in those towers on a normal day. From New York, we go to Ottawa. Don Newman has been watching the Canadian government reaction and action to this. Don?
Well, Peter, at the moment there is a meeting going on in the Prime Minister's office. Senior staff, the Prime Minister, he is not going now to Halifax. That has been cancelled. And there will be an emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon for the Canadian response on all of this. Interestingly enough, the airports closed down by the Transport Department. The Transport Minister, David Collinette, now that the airports are closed down, isn't in Canada, and he won't be coming back. He is in London. And Foreign Affairs Minister John Manley is over the Atlantic in an Air Canada flight from Frankfurt to Toronto. As you've been pointing out, the planes have been landing there, but other than that, the airlines are not taking off. Let me show you what it looks like at the Ottawa International Airport. It's pretty quiet all of a sudden out there. As you can see, there are people, the police with bomb dogs, we assume, although they use those dogs too to check for drugs when people come in. But a pretty quiet scene on what is usually a pretty busy airport in the nation's capital. There's some people at Air Canada, but Canada 3000. Some people, I guess, trying to reschedule their flights, but maybe not hearing that the flights have been canceled. But pretty slow going out at what is usually a pretty busy airport at this time of day. Also reporting Parliament Hill. It won't be gridlocked because it has been closed, not for people working there and not for the business of the day, although Parliament, as you know, is not sitting until next Monday, but it has been closed to tourists as a security precaution. In New York, the Canadian consulate, which is on Broadway up in the Exxon building in Midtown, not very close to where all of the activity has been going on down at the south end of Manhattan, down near Wall Street. The Canadian consulate is still open at the moment to help Canadians who might find themselves in difficulty there. And the same with the embassy in Washington, still open. It's not near the Pentagon, but it is very close, as you know, to Capitol Hill. But at the moment, at least, both the Canadian embassy in Washington and the Canadian consulate in New York are open. Parliament Hill is closed to tourists. It is quiet here around the American embassy, and the streets of Ottawa don't seem too much different than they have been on any other day. An emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon. The two cabinet ministers probably not there because the airports are closed down.
All right, Don, thank you very much. We've got more information now coming in from a number of different American airlines as they now confirm the horrible statistics that we have been assuming for these last few hours in terms of the number of passengers on the aircraft that apparently were hijacked. We have American Airlines, Flight 11 from Boston, a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. American Airlines describing that flight as lost. That is the first aircraft, we believe, that went into the first tower of the World Trade Center. They're also confirming lost Flight 77. This is American Airlines from Washington, Dulles Airport. A Boeing 757, I believe it was also on its way to Los Angeles, as was the first one. 58 passengers on board that, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots. United Airlines confirming that Flight 93 has crashed near Pittsburgh. It was traveling from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. That is the one that we are told was a Boeing 747, but I have not seen the airline itself actually confirm that yet. Also, there is a United Airlines announcing that they have one of its flights, 175 from Austin, Texas, is unaccounted for. That's a 757. So you can tell this story is still very much in the ongoing stages. Aircraft that are unaccounted for, crashes that are unexplained, and the horrific scene that still continues to unfold in New York City as you look live at that great American city. The FBI is saying that it believes that the flight from Newark that I just read, the Newark, New Jersey flight from Newark to San Francisco, United Airlines Flight 93, the FBI believes it is the one that went down near but not on Camp David. So that is the situation in terms, the latest situation we're getting in terms of aircraft. But as we told you just a few minutes ago, we're looking now at Washington. This is the Pentagon building where the smoke's still pouring out of one end of the Pentagon building, really one side. A light aircraft, we're told, crashed near the Pentagon building. World leaders continue to react. Britain's Tony Blair says he will hold crisis talks with his top ministers in London after the attacks. He was at a trade union meeting in the southern English coastal town of Brighton, and he's now on his way back to London. I believe he's actually back in London. He's to have a meeting with his senior ministers. His spokesman said the meeting was expected to start around 5 p.m. London time, so that's in the next half hour or so. Those the latest updates we can tell you on this story, which is very clearly still in the ongoing stages. You can see the fire department officials trying to get that situation under control at the side of the Pentagon building, where we're told a light aircraft crashed into the Pentagon building. The damage, we're told, is minor. There has been no report of the extent of the casualties, either dead or injured. There are assumptions that there are casualties, though, in the situation at the Pentagon building. Nothing compared to what we know about the enormous casualties expected at the World Trade Center. This is the Washington Monument in Washington, as what we believe to be, we're not sure, but this may well be the President of the United States, who just a couple of hours ago was in Florida, near Sarasota, Florida, and it is about a 2-hour flight from, or a little less than that, from Florida back to Washington. And then from the main airport at the Andrews Air Force Base, the President usually takes a helicopter back to the White House. Now, we'll obviously, if the President of the United States has something to say, and if he is on board that helicopter, we'll be hearing from him. Look at that incredible scene as the camera pans from one side of Washington to the other, and I'm not sure. While we wait for developments in Washington, let's go to Toronto. There's a news conference taking place at the airport in Toronto. Let's listen in right now.
Canada, that's the FAA of the States, and that is Transport Canada. We do have an issue where there are flights being redirected from American airspace that are in the air that need to come to airports. We're working with NAV Canada to ensure that we will be able to allow those flights to land here and to park here if necessary. So currently we are making the arrangements to clear as much surface space as possible to allow those planes to park here and to be able to handle those passengers with buses, whatever we need to do to handle them here. Obviously, this is an irregular operation. And one thing I would make clear is that regular operations simply are not happening. If people have flights scheduled for leaving Pearson Airport today, consider those not happening. If you absolutely do not need to fly today, please do not fly, do not come to the airport. That's about it, and I can take questions.
Quelles sont les mesures de sécurité que vous avez prises à Pearson, Mr. Craig?
I cannot speak to the security measures. I need to speak to Transport Canada about that. I can give you a phone number that is for media and public inquiries. It is 613-947-5066.
How many planes are you expecting to be diverted to Pearson?
We do not know. That is a decision that is being made by the FAA and by NAV Canada. Obviously, these planes are in various locations in airspace right now, and those decisions will be made by the air traffic control authorities. We're making as much space available to be able to allow them here, and we'll take what we can.
How many space do you have?
Security because you believe Pearson is becoming a target with all the international flights coming in?
Again, I won't speak to security issues. That's a Transport Canada issue.
Has something landed from those of the redirected ones?
To my knowledge, at this point, I don't think we received any of those planes at this point.
How many planes can you receive?
It's difficult to put a number on that. We've cleared as much space as we possibly can here at the airport, tarmac, to be able to park them. We still have the flights that didn't get out of Pearson Airport this morning here, though, that are taking up space as well at gates.
How many flights is that?
Again, I do not have the numbers.
How many flights do you get every day?
Oh, hundreds. Again, I don't want to get into specifics because I'll probably give out a wrong number.
Every hour.
It depends on the hour. We can.
In the morning at 9 o'clock, rush hour.
Rush hour, we're talking around 50 to 60.
When you say flights with North America, does it mean that the flight that comes from Vancouver right now cannot come here?
Those decisions are being made right now where planes are going to be routed. So it's not a decision for the airport to make. Flights within North America have been canceled. They have been canceled. That is.
So a flight from Vancouver or Sudbury.
Nothing. My understanding is at this point, nothing is leaving or arriving at Pearson Airport
except
domestically.
Flights that are supposed to go into the United States.
We are ready to accept those. Yes.
Who made the decision to?
That you've had to shut the airport like this?
I wouldn't say it's shutting the airport. The airport is still fully operational. We do not have any operational problems. This is a irregular operation. That's what we would call it.
But is it a first?
To my knowledge, yes, it is.
Are all major airports following suit, Vancouver and Montreal?
My understanding is they are, yes.
Who made that decision?
This is a decision made by multi-agencies. It's the FAA working with NAV Canada, working with Transport Canada, and us working with them. Again, I'll stress this is an issue much larger than Pearson Airport. We're playing our role in this, but we are working with the larger agencies to make sure that we can play our role as best as we can.
And why cancel the flights? Is it for security purposes, or is it to clear the airports?
Again, we don't operate flights. We don't cancel flights. We're an airport, and these are decisions that are being made by multi-agencies, so I can't speak to that.
There seems to be some ambulance here. Have you heard about anybody like stress or heart attack?
I have not heard of anything like that in the terminal.
There are reports that a hijacked plane is on its way to Toronto.
You
deny or?
I cannot speak to that. Again, speak to Transport Canada Security about that. There are lots of caution. There are going to be a lot of rumors. There are a lot of rumors out there. And that will happen in situations like this, and I'm not going to comment on any of those.
If all the flights are redirected to Toronto, aren't you concerned at all that Toronto might become a target?
Again, it's a security issue. I'd rather not speak with it. We are working with the necessary agencies to make sure that we are prepared for all outcomes.
Are people sitting in Pearson Airport right now safe, according to you?
Yes, they are. We are asking people to not come to the airport. If they're at the airport expecting flights, those flights aren't likely to leave. So we're making arrangements with the airlines and communicating with people in the terminal to get them away from here because there's no need for them to be here.
Peter, what if somebody had relatives traveling in the States this morning and a plane? Is there a number here in Toronto they can call?
Again, that'll be an airline-by-airline specific request. So people, if they need to contact their airlines directly.
Any flights that took off earlier today, are they being asked to come down?
Not to my knowledge at this point, although that could be part of the redirected flights that are currently being coordinated.
When you say today, is that until tomorrow morning?
No. There are various. That'll be updated on a continual basis. There'll be times. They'll do it in a 3 or 4 hour period.
So how far does the cancellation extend to?
The last I checked it before I came here, there was one cancellation for domestic flights till noon, but I do suspect that will be extended.
Was Pearson
Is Pearson prepared for this? Was the airport prepared for this type of incident?
We do substantial emergency planning at this airport. We have
All right, we're going to switch from the Toronto news conference handling the overflow of traffic, going to Boston. There's a news conference at the Boston airport on what happened to the aircraft that was hijacked out of Boston.
All departing flights. We've increased our security measures. We've shut down all the construction sites within Logan Airport, both airside and landside. And we've shut down all security checkpoints and removed all passengers who had been previously screened out into the non-secure part of the airport. We've activated our Family Assistance Center at the Hilton Hotel based upon some reports that some of these flights may have originated from Boston. We're asking the media's assistance to notify any family members that may have had families flying on those flights that we've had various reports on to call these following numbers. American Airlines, 800-245-0999. Secondly, family members can call a Massport number, 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's all I have right now.
Joe, you've got to tell us more about these planes that left this morning.
What flights do you have reports on?
The flights, I cannot confirm or deny any flight numbers because I have not received official notification on any flight numbers.
So how can we get people to call
in?
these numbers?
So it'll be everybody who's got a flight.
Okay, I do believe several of the media outlets are broadcasting several flight numbers. I believe they're broadcast flight number 11, American Airlines.
Is there a second flight out of Boston involved in this?
I don't know at this point in time.
Were the passengers hijacked?
I cannot confirm that.
Has the airport accounted for all outbound flights?
That's outside of the scope of the airport's responsibility. We're leaving it up to the FAA to conduct that activity.
Joe, what is the code? Joe, what is the code Fort Knox? We have reports of employees screaming Fort Knox around the airport at the time that the planes went into the World Trade Center.
I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean have any connotation here at Logan Airport.
What about planes that are flying in here? Are they being rerouted somewhere else?
Aircraft were flying into Logan Airport. We did take some arrivals, but now since the airport is shut down, these flights will be diverted to Canada.
They're not taking flights either.
Are you screening passengers who were let off their airplanes through the terminal? You said remove them to another area?
Remove them to another area, yes.
Where are they now, and what are they doing?
They're being directed to seek either public transportation or their own transportation out of the airport.
Process going on before they were removed?
Leaving the airport? No.
How long do you anticipate the airport to be closed?
It's indefinite at this time. We'll be meeting with the FAA. We'll be conducting an analysis of our intelligence that we have. We'll make a determination later on this afternoon. Pardon me? I can just tell you briefly, we have shut down security checkpoints. We've moved everyone away from the boarding gate areas. We've increased police presence dramatically. We've requested additional state police be sent to the airport. And we've shut down some construction activities around the airport.
Is this the highest level of security ever, Joe?
Is another flight from Boston to
I can't confirm or deny that right now.
Was there anything unusual about the boarding procedure of this American flight this morning that you can report that?
I don't have any reports that would say the same.
Are you investigating breaches of security? How are you getting to the bottom of this hijacking?
I can tell you we have an ongoing investigation right now. Just an initial investigation. It's being conducted with Massport, Massachusetts State Police, and the FBI.
What do you know
I don't have any, I can't confirm or anything or deny anything on that particular flight. No, they have not.
Joe, did Flight 11 leave on time? Were there any delays? And was there any conversation between the pilot and the tower that seemed unusual?
Flight number 11 left at 7:59. I believe it was on time, and everything went as scheduled when it left Logan Airport.
How many people were on board?
I don't have a passenger count right now.
Are you aware of any communications from the pilot?
No, I'm not.
Would its flight path to L.A. normally have taken it south or towards New York, south-west?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that flight path.
When did the tower here detect that there was something wrong?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
You know what time this,
I don't know.
you know what time this United flight left?
I have no information on the United flight right now.
How unusual would it be for a plane to fly towards New York if it were heading to Los Angeles?
Again, I'm not familiar with the particular flight patterns they may have filed.
Was it a non-stop flight to Los Angeles?
I believe it was.
At what time, sir, were the flights stopped at Logan? You know?
What?
At what time?
What time was the airport
shut down?
I believe we shut the airport down to arriving flights somewhere around 9:15.
All right, we're going
departing
to
flights
dip
shortly
out now of that news conference coming out of Boston. A difficult day for everyone here and for airline and airport officials trying to explain what they know and what they don't know, what they can confirm and what they have to deny at this point. Very difficult. Clearly, Boston Airport involved in a couple of the aircraft that were hijacked, and one at least is one of the aircraft that went into the World Trade Tower in New York City. The first aircraft, we believe, from Boston, originally destined for Los Angeles, hijacked shortly after leaving Boston, again crashing in New York. A quick update on that Pennsylvania situation. We were led to believe it was a 747 that had crashed. We're now told it was a 757. Still an enormous aircraft with a lot of people on board. Still more details to come in on that. We saw earlier the situation in Toronto with the news conference at the Toronto airport, as they have been stopped all air traffic in and out of this city except emergency landings which have been taking place, and a number of aircraft brought in and who are staying now on the ground in Toronto. The same thing is happening at a number of Canadian airports, including Halifax. Paul Withers joins us by phone. He's just been in a briefing at the Halifax airport. Paul, what can you tell us?
Peter, about 12 airliners en route to the U.S. have touched down in Halifax. As in Toronto, those planes are remaining on the ground. They've shut down one of the runways, and they're using it essentially as a parking lot for large passenger planes. The RCMP will be sweeping each plane. Right now, passengers will remain on board. About 50 airliners are expected to touch down here in Halifax. As I look out right now, I see a large Air France flight coming in. They're landing at about the rate of every few minutes here in Halifax. Again, like Toronto and other Canadian airports, all outbound flights, of course, are canceled. As of right now, the passengers are going to remain on board. Peter?
All right, Paul, thanks very much. And one assumes it's going to be some time before any of those aircraft are released and allowed to go on their way. Certainly until there is a better understanding in the United States of exactly what has happened here today. We know, obviously, the aftermath of what's happened, but why it happened, how it happened, and at what stage this whole attack by an unknown terrorist group at this time, although, as expected, a number of groups are starting to claim responsibility, but until we have some sense of real confirmation on these, this is the kind of thing that happens on days like this, although there has never been a day like this. Where it's expected the death toll is going to be enormous, well into the thousands, possibly into the tens of thousands, as both towers at the World Trade Center in New York have toppled to the ground following aircraft hits on both of them. Other aircraft incidents in Pennsylvania, near Camp David, a car bomb outside the State Department in Washington, a small plane hitting the area near the Pentagon. You can imagine the kind of chaos that is is going on in the command and control structure in the United States, normally centered part of it here at the Pentagon as we look live at the Pentagon where the smoke is still clearing from the incident there, trying to determine what happened here today, why it happened, whether it's still ongoing, which aircraft are unaccounted for at this time, while they try to get all aircraft on the ground. Quickly in other areas, in Ottawa, security has been stepped up both at the United States Embassy and a few blocks away at the Prime Minister's residence at 24 Sussex Drive. The Prime Minister has cancelled a trip he had been planning to take to Halifax today. The Department of Foreign Affairs says Canadians with friends and loved ones in New York City should call this number. Please listen carefully. I will repeat it. For Canadians with friends and loved ones in New York City, please call 1-800-387-3124. That number again, 1-800-387-3124. This is the picture of that second aircraft going into the World Trade Center as we approach 9 o'clock on the west coast, high noon here in central Canada, and just before 1 o'clock on the most of Canada's east coast. We will be showing you from time to time the pictures of what happened here, as incredible as they seem. This is what we normally reserve for Hollywood thrillers, and we talk about how animation and post-production can make these things appear real. This is no movie. This is very real. It happened about 3 hours ago in New York City. Within 90 minutes of that second aircraft hitting the building, both towers lay in rubble on the ground, and with them, we do not know the casualty list. We do know 50,000 people on a normal day work in those twin towers. More details. Rail traffic now closed throughout the northeastern United States, and definitely between New York City and Washington. There is an attempt here to try and control an unknown situation on the ground. Border points between Canada and the United States, security has been beefed up, and there is a very different kind of checking going on. We're told certainly at the border points in eastern Canada, we assume right across the nation. The latest on the Pittsburgh situation. And United Airlines has confirmed one of its aircraft crashed near Pittsburgh. It was a 757. We don't know any more about the details on that, although we have to assume that it is in some manner connected to what we have already seen witnessed in New York and Washington. That's the latest on that one. Okay, let's just quickly check back in as we look at tape from New York. This is the immediate aftermath of the towers falling in New York City. Let's quickly check in with Ron Charles, who was at that news conference at the Toronto airport at Pearson International Airport, as officials detailed on just how they're handling the situation, not only the overflow of flights coming in, but also their own security concerns here in Toronto. Ron, update us on what was said there.
Peter, Toronto Airport is one of the airports that's going to be receiving many of the en route flights that had been going to U.S. airports that are all now closed. In order to do that, Toronto's had to cancel flights in and out of the airport in Canada, therefore, in order to make room for these flights to land. None of the flights have landed here yet, but they are expecting a good number of people here.
All right, Ron. Thank you very much. There were a number of questions there that came up that the officials have to say they really can't give any details. Some of them were ominous issues of whether or not there was an aircraft in some form of distress heading this way. Did that come up there?
That's right. That's right. They have not given us any details about that, nor have they given us any details about security precautions here at Pearson Airport in Toronto. But they will be doing updates throughout the day.
All right. Ron Charles reporting from the Toronto airport for us. Okay, let me, as we continue to look at the scene in New York City, the Twin Towers down. Let's go over the very basically here now. NBC, hard to read this. NBC says there may have been as many as 20,000 people still in the towers when this incident happened this morning. The first plane to hit that tower was at 8:45. The issue is how many people were already in their offices by then. NBC estimating there could have been 20,000. The issue is how many got out after that, before the second plane hit, and obviously before the towers collapsed. We don't know. But the mayor of New York has said the death toll will be enormous. The initial response from the Canadian Red Cross, mobilizing teams to Canadian airports to deal with stranded Americans and organizing centers to offer help to people in Canada trying to track down relatives in the United States. We heard earlier the Prime Minister condemning the cowardly attack that has taken place in the United States. Let me confirm for you now. This is what we can tell you with certainty about aircraft that were hijacked and have since crashed, as we continue to watch the tape of what happened in New York City earlier this morning, about 3 hours ago now, when the second aircraft hit, and about 90 minutes ago, by the time both towers were down, having suffered such severe structural damage they couldn't stand. The hijackings, 4 confirmed hijackings. American Airlines flight number 11, Boston to LA. That is confirmed. It was hijacked. It then crashed into the